Thank you. Good afternoon and welcome to the May 24th, 2021 Park Advisory Committee meeting of the East Bay Regional Park District. Chair Rickard, shall I take roll?
Yes, Madam Secretary, please take the roll and ask members to state their names, their appointing authority, and their hometown when they respond.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to acknowledge that Board Member Lane is present today. Vice Chair Obringer.
I am present. I am appointed by the Contra Costa Mayor's Conference, and I also serve on the Concord City Council, so that is my hometown. Thank you.
Member Arce.
Yeah, my name is Marie Arce, and I am appointed by Director Coffey, and my hometown is Antioch.
Member Best.
Yes, Linda Best. I live in Alamo, and I'm appointed by Director Beverly Lane.
Member Burke.
Hi, everybody. I'm Annie Burke. I live in Berkeley, and I'm appointed by the Alameda County Board of Supervisors.
Member Carey.
Hi, my name is Andrew Carey. I live in Newark. I'm appointed by Director Weiskamp.
Thank you. Member Chang.
Hi, my name is James Chang, and I am from Berkeley, California, representing Director Elizabeth Eccles.
Thank you. Member Claxton.
Sorry, I forgot to unmute. Hello, everybody. I'm from Fremont, California, and Dennett Swasby is my board member. Thanks.
Thank you. Member Corkin.
Hi, I'm Sharon Corkin. I'm appointed by the Alameda Labor Council.
Thank you. Member Gregory. He might not be here just yet. Member Ho. Okay. Member Lacey.
Hi, I'm Michelle Lacey, and my hometown is Pleasant Hill, and I'm appointed by Director Lane.
Thank you. Member Mahadevan.
Hey, Dev Mahadevan. I was appointed by Director Dennis Waspy, and I live in Castro Valley.
Thank you. Member Nason.
Yes, I'm Rochelle Nason. I am appointed by the Alameda County Mayor's Conference, and I'm live in Albany, where I serve on the City Council.
Member Ho, I see you're here. Would you like to introduce yourself?
I'm Adela Ho, appointed by Director Eccles, and I live in West Contra Costa County, unincorporated Richmond.
Thank you. Member Robinson.
Lisa Robinson, appointed by Director Coffey, and I live in Pittsburgh.
Thank you. Member San Juan.
Hi, I'm Olivia San Wong, and I was appointed by Director Wieskamp, and I live in Pleasanton, where I also serve on the Zone 7 Water Board.
Thank you. Member Skardoff.
Hello, I'm Igor Skardoff. I live in Martinez. I'm representing the Contra Costa Special Districts Association, and I'm chair of the board for the Contra Costa Special Resource Conservation District, and I am this year's chairman of the LAFCO Commission.
Member Tsutsui.
Hi, I'm Neil Tsutsui. I live in El Cerrito, and I'm appointed by the Contra Costa Board of Supervisors.
Thank you. Member Williams.
Hi, yes, I'm Roland Williams, appointed by the Alameda County Special Districts Association, and I live and work in Castro Valley.
Thank you. And Chair Rickard.
Rick Rickard, appointed by Director Rosario, and I live in Oakland. And I believe you skipped Linda DeChambeau and Irene Dieter.
Oh, golly, I'm so sorry. I see your hands up. Member Dieter, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Irene Dieter. I was appointed by Ellen Corbett, and I live in Alameda.
Okay, and Member DeChambeau.
Hey, everybody, it's Linda. I was appointed by Di Rosario, and I live in the town of Moraga.
Thank you. And I don't see Member Gregory. He may come later. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, my apologies. And staff present today, Eric Fuller, Chief of Government and Legislative Affairs, Jim O'Connor, AGM of Operations, Carol Johnson, AGM of Public Affairs, Chief Chiaburo, AGM of Public Safety, Lisa Georgian, Chief of Design and Construction, Yolanda Burial Knight, Clerk of the Board, Lance Breed, Captain, Alan Love, Captain, Sabrina Pennell, Matthew James, Sydney Erickson from Prime Gov. Have I missed anybody? Let me catch everybody. Okay, thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you. Today's committee meeting is held in accordance with Governor Newsom's executive order allowing for members to participate in standing committee meetings remotely. We're also providing live audio streaming and have provided the public the opportunity to email or call in prior to the meeting for public comment. This information can be found on the agenda and on the district website, ebparks.org. Also want to mention that something that came up, and just as a matter of discussion recently, is that these sessions are recorded and are available to be listened to at a later date. And so members of the public and members of the press are able to access them, and you may find yourself quoted when you say something. So just be aware that you're on the public record when you're talking, and make you aware of that. Are there any questions about our procedure? Hearing none, we will go forward. Our first agenda item is approval of the minutes of April 26th.
I move approval of the minutes of April 26th.
I'll second.
Okay.
Linda?
Moved by Roland Williams, seconded by Linda Best. Any discussion?
Linda D. Seconded by Linda D. Oh, unless we both spoke at the same time.
Oh, okay. Linda D. Okay. I knew it was a Linda. Any further discussion? Rochelle.
Yeah, I had a tiny correction to the minutes. I asked a question about Point Malate, and in the minutes, this is at the bottom of page 1. It looks like I'm asking about the other project that was under discussion, the Sino proposal. So I think it might be simplest just to remove that whole the sentence and the response, since the rest of the Point Malate stuff was omitted.
Okay. Roland, are you okay with?
Is that the first sentence of the last paragraph, or?
Yes, and the response. So it's the first, it would be strike the first 2 sentences of the last paragraph on page 1.
All right. Yeah, I'm fine with that correction.
Okay.
And amend my motion to reflect.
Okay.
And my second as well.
Okay, thank you, Linda. Any further discussion? Madam Secretary, would you please call the roll?
Yes, thank you. Vice Chair Obringer?
Yes.
Member Arce?
Yes.
Member Best?
Yes.
Member Burke?
Yes.
Member Carey? Member
Yes, I was muted. Sorry.
Member Chang?
Yes.
Member Claxton?
Yes.
Member Corkin?
Yes.
Member DeChambeau?
Yes.
Member Dieter?
Yes.
Member Ho?
Yes.
Member Lacy?
Yes.
Member Mahadevan?
Yes.
Member Nason?
Yes.
Member Robinson?
Yes.
Member San Juan?
Yes.
Member Skardoff?
Yes.
Member Sitsui?
Yes.
Member Williams?
Yes.
And Chair Rickard.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next item on our agenda is comments from Beverly Lane, the Board of Director member from Ward 6.
Well, hello, everybody. It's nice to be here again and see your smiling faces, even if we're not together. Well, what's been happening in the Park District? You know, we, as always, we are coping with how to begin opening and how to approach the concept of vaccination and staff services within the Park District. We, that at this point, we can't ask staff if they've been vaccinated or not. And we still have that issue of not putting 2 people in a truck or an extra person in the helicopter. And however, some really positive things are happening. The visitor centers are open at a set capacity. Volunteers are starting to work again, in particular, the Volunteer Safety Patrol. And we're starting to have some dedications that I'm very excited about. One we had last week, which was the coal mine exhibit opening at Black Diamond, and I saw several of you there. The idea for having a coal mine exhibit placed underground has been around for decades, and to finally have it actually in place for people throughout the Park District and retirees of the Park District, it's a very exciting event. And then tomorrow there will be an opening for the Del Valle Visitor Center, which is again something that people have talked about for a long time. For those of you who haven't been to Del Valle, particularly in the summer when it's a city with thousands of people, you can appreciate how important it would be to have a place where interpretation of the natural resources and cultural resources can take place. And this visitor center is a pretty fascinating one, and it talks a lot about the watershed around Del Valle and how the water is used, how it is elevated and how it goes down, and has a mountain lion inside looking at you as you come in. So I think people will really enjoy that, and I hope all of you will have the opportunity to go out and see it sometime. And then you'll have a presentation later about the proposed name for the Concord Hills Regional Park. Concord Hills was a placeholder. We didn't want to call it the Naval Weapons Station Regional Park, and so we used the name Concord Hills for several years. And the district has had an overwhelming advocacy for the name, which Brian will talk to you about later on. My concern is that people who are looking forward to this name for many reasons also understand that the narratives that take place inside that park are going to be beyond the Port Chicago explosion, beginning with the Chupcan Indians whose homeland it is, and talking about the Spanish, where Anza came through nearly 250 years ago, the Rancho, the agriculture, the Navy. And at our board meeting last week, we heard from people who were descendants of residents who lived in Port Chicago and who who lost their homes and ranches because the Navy decided that they needed to expand, and they used eminent domain in a fairly short-term, pretty brutal way. And so we need to remember that story as well as the military story and Port Chicago tragedies. So each of our visitor center has a foundation document that has been developed to provide a focus for what that visitor center should pay attention to. And Concord Hills is no different, although the one I have seen still has draft on it. But they talk very much about the resilience of the people there and the many things that happen in this beautiful new park. So I'm hoping that for advocates of the Thurgood Marshall name and for others who have been waiting for this park to open, they'll come to appreciate the many different stories that are reflected in this new park. So those are my comments for today. And if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to try and answer them. And I'll probably chime in. I promise to put my hand up, Rick,
Okay.
as you have the rest of the meeting. So thanks for having me.
Great. Are there any questions for Director Lane? Dev, do you have a question?
Yeah, has the name been decided?
It's being brought to us today. It's on our agenda.
It has been recommended by the executive committee. And the next step was to come and review it with the PAC. And then it is due to come to the board, the first meeting in June.
Thank you.
Olivia.
Yes, the Del Val ribbon cutting, I believe it's on Wednesday, not tomorrow.
Oh, that's right. Wednesday at 11.
Yes. And I know I'm also very much looking forward to it. And I think it's going to be a really nice visitor center. And I think it'll be a great, I'm really appreciative that you've included a lot of information about the watershed. And I think that there's just so much goodwill between, Zone 7 and East Bay Regional Parks at Del Val.
Yeah.
Great. Carlin.
Thank you. Well, I'm bummed that I've been missing these ribbon cuttings. I'm super excited that it's like once a week these are happening, which I know this is very unusual. So I'm sorry to miss them. Just one thing, I can either say it now or the next agenda item, but just thought I would share now that at the Concord City Council meeting tomorrow night, we have on our agenda to pass a resolution to approve support for the name Thurgood Regional Park, home of the Port Chicago 50. So obviously nobody needs the Concord City Council's blessing to do anything at this point, but I did just want to share that my colleagues and I are supportive. So just wanted to share that with the group. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Any other questions? All right. Thank you, Beverly. We appreciate the report. The next item on the agenda is the foundation update. Is that you, Carol Johnson?
Well, yes, it is actually. Thank you. I've given Juliana the night off or the afternoon off. Nice to see everybody. There's some new faces here for me to get to know. I'm Carol Johnson, the Executive Director of the Regional Parks Foundation. I also am the Assistant General Manager of Public Affairs. And I want to share with you tonight regarding the foundation that my message to you is that membership is going gangbusters. We have weekly increases in membership up to 30% new members, which is great. I think people have really, really felt so excited about continuing to be able to access our parks, and now even more so with more things opening, thanks to our members of operations and public safety teams as well. Our grants, unfortunately, are down, which means that corporations are still trying to figure out what they're doing in terms of funding. So hopefully that will change over the next 12 to 18 months. We'll just keep our fingers crossed. One of the interesting things that we are funding is for a study on acacia trees that are currently in the tree die-off category that we are suffering. We have over 1,000 acres of trees that are dead or dying, and obviously they cause a lot of fuels and fire concern. So one of the things, and nobody really knows exactly what the reason is other than climate change and drought, but so the foundation is funding a study through UC Berkeley to get a little bit more detail on that tree die-off situation specific to acacias. And I just wanted to mention that our foundation just had its annual review through its audit, clean audit, and happy to say that we had income and revenue of 34% increase over 2019 with a total of $13 million in assets. And that is actually a record, I'm happy to say. So we're continuing our upward trajectory despite some challenging economic times. So nonetheless, I hope you're all members. If not, we can certainly talk to you about membership. And that's my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. Questions for Carol about the foundation? Igor.
Yes, well, thank you for that interesting report. It's quite a testament to the grassroots supports that the Park District gets, that you're getting a lot of individual contributors. And, you know, the corporate folks will probably get their feet under them pretty soon, and that'll come along as well. I did have a comment on the acacia trees. I think by most native plant folks, they're considered to be a nuisance and it's something that's undesirable to have around. And certainly as they're dying, they're going to be an even bigger fire hazard. Is there a concern that the acacia trees ought to be saved in some way? I guess not knowing more about it than that, I would wonder whether that'd be worth the effort.
Well, I have to say, I can't speak to what our stewardship department is considering. I think at this point, they're just trying to figure out the uniqueness of all the different tree species that are suffering in this die-off, and if there's anything unique to the individual trees. So I will pass your comments along to our ASD department, but I really can't comment on whether or not they're interested in saving the acacias or not.
Yeah, well, thank you for that.
Well, I will add that I don't think anybody is out there trying to save these trees that are dead at this point, and eucalyptus and acacias, as well as pines and some others, are part of this swath of yellow dead trees that you can see. We've taken some photographs of these areas, and I can tell you it's really a devastating thing to see, and it's also extremely dangerous. So one of the things that we are trying to do as the state is generating funds to address wildfires is to get some funds to help eradicate these trees, because a lot of them are in Chabot and Tilden, directly in that interface.
Yeah.
That is such a frightening one. And the estimate to get rid of the dead trees is around $40 million. So it's a crisis.
Yes,
thank you. Thanks for clarifying that. I just support the idea that these are a nuisance, and getting them out of there is a good thing. And $40 million is a really big price to pay.
Yeah,
So
I hear you, Igor.
Yeah.
I'd like to add that on Thursday of this week is our first major removal of these dead trees. We have a contractor coming in to Redwood Regional Park to remove 200 off of the East Ridge Trail. So we're hoping to create a little bit of media play which today actually we got some media coverage on this issue. But nonetheless, I think it's going to be quite interesting visually to see these dead trees at this particular very popular area and being removed. So that's our goal, is to get the public to understand what's happening. Also to get our legislators, through Eric's assistance, to assist us in the asks for more funding. As Director Lane said, it is quite expensive.
Certainly prevention is a lot cheaper than firefighting, so it makes all kinds of economic sense.
Yeah, thank you. Adela, you have a question.
Well, actually, just a comment, and the stewardship department probably already knows this, but I was on a tour out by Morgan Territory with Save Mount Diablo, and I guess they have also areas of tree die-off, which they don't know what they're being caused by. So I just wanted to mention it so that they can connect if they need to.
Great. Thank
Yes.
you.
Thank you. Oh, go ahead. Christina Kelchner. Oh, I didn't see you. Christina can absolutely share that this is not just a local issue with us. It certainly is regional and statewide as well. Christina.
Thank you, Carol. These are all excellent comments. And Christina Kelchner, I think you all know me, AGM of Acquisition Stewardship and Development. So I have been working with our stewardship team on this. And first I will say, Igor, no, there is not a thought that we need to save the acacia trees. This is really about how do we deal with the dead fuel and the danger that that poses. And I'd also share that there are many different pathogens that are causing these die-offs, but the root cause is drought stress. And that we're seeing it hit acacia and eucalyptus because they are not native trees and they were planted, in a plantation format. So that it's not a natural, healthy ecosystem. And so they're more stressed to begin with. And so the drought condition is hitting them harder. So that being said, it's not exclusively non-native trees. I know Save Mount Diablo is also seeing, Mount Diablo, who we've met with Save Mount Diablo, who's told us about the tree die-offs on Mount Diablo, and they are seeing some impact to manzanitas as well. So we are working on the science side of things. We are working with UC Berkeley and some other scientists to better understand the root causes. And if Carol, if you didn't mention that the Parks Foundation, I think, is going to be providing some funding to help with that scientific research to more fully understand it. But at this point, the main focus is we have a lot of dead trees out there, a lot of fuels with fire season coming. We really are needing the funding to come in to just remove that dead material.
Thank you, Christina. Eric, I think you wanted to add to this as well.
Yeah, just quickly, thanks, Director Lane, for mentioning the funding piece at the state level. We're pushing very hard for that. We have some requests in with our delegation, and it's our highest priority at the moment. But what I did want to also comment on was the article that Carol referenced. There was an article in the East Bay Times today about the tree mortality issue, and it quoted me. And I have never talked to a reporter since I've worked at at the Park District. So it just goes to show that these meetings, the quote was from the PAC presentation that we did with Eileen last week. So it just goes to show that these meetings being taped and on YouTube, all our words are being recorded and listened to, not only by the people that we see on the screens, but also potentially reporters outside. So just wanted to give that caution to folks, because it was very much a surprise to see my name and it's something that I never talked to the reporter about.
Well, I'm sure it was a good quote, Eric. Thank you for representing the Park District well. Madam Secretary, do we have any public comments?
We do, Chair Rickard. We have public comments under our item for the Concord Hills naming, but we also have, I believe, two speakers that might have items that are not on the agenda. So
okay.
I'm going to go ahead and
let's hear from those two folks then.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Rairegi, do you have a comment?
I do.
Thank you.
Members of the PAC, this is William Rairegi with Mission Peak Conservancy.
Given the 2020 census, redistricting will occur and the PAC should be encouraged to participate in the discussion. Ward boundaries are too important to leave to the board and consultants by themselves. The public and our agents on the PAC should be consulted, community meetings held, and boundaries created that maximize representation. On a different note, parking restrictions have impacted the opportunity at Mission Peak and limits the number of visitors to the park on weekends and holidays. During the last 16 months, over 826 citations have been handed out in the local neighborhood at a cost of visitors of $53,000. The park district no longer participates in handing out citations, and the $326,000 salary cost for community service officers and parking compliance officers is now borne by the city. Hooray. Parking is an issue at Mission Peak, Vargas Plateau, and Coyote Hills Regional Parks. Mission Peak has 43 slots in the official parking lot and several hundred legal spaces in the neighborhood. A new staging area was authorized in 2016 with 300 slots. We look forward to that staging area being built sometime in the future after a lease is signed. Vargas Plateau has 25 slots in the only staging area. Far more parking is needed both inside and outside the park. We are working with the city of Fremont to develop more parking that will accommodate park visitors without conflict with the neighbors and look to the district for guidance. Coyote Hills has developed parking, but many visitors find the parking lots full on weekends. We are asking the city of Fremont to open parking outside the park to accommodate visitors' usage. We ask East Bay Regional Park District operations staff to accommodate these requests by working with city staff to maximize available parking where safe. By the way, I've seen little drought impact on the abundance of poison oak in our regional parks. Thank you.
Thank you, William.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Mr. Olson, do you have a public comment this evening?
I request that you read the email that I sent to you, please.
Okay, give me a moment.
Timely interruption during the silence. I got a spam phone call.
My apologies, Mr. Olson. I'm going to need a little more time to look for your public comment. I apologize. I read that incorrectly. I didn't realize I was supposed to read it this evening. But if you'll give me a few moments, I will look. And do you mind if it goes a little bit later?
Yeah, you're fine. Thank you.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Okay, we'll come back to you, Bruce.
Thank you. Chair Rickard, shall we do our Concord Hills presentation and then have our public speakers on that item after the presentation? Or
Yes.
Would you prefer? Okay.
Yeah, let's go ahead with the presentation and hear from the public after that.
Thank you.
So I will turn it over to Brian Holt.
Christina's going to do an introduction here.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. Good afternoon, members of the PAC and Director Lane. I'm Christina Kelchner, Assistant General Manager of the Acquisition Stewardship and Development Division. As you may recall, the last time the PAC met, there were several public comments regarding a name for the future park at the Concord, the former Concord Naval Weapons Station. And so we're very pleased to have an opportunity to be able to bring this item back to the PAC for you all to consider and to make a recommendation on a name. As Director Lane mentioned, and I will just say that we're also very pleased to have Director Lane here for this item tonight. As you all know, she's been a tremendous supporter of this park for decades and is a huge part of the reason that the Park District was able to take possession of the property last year and complete our planning process. So she's a big part of why this park is going to be a reality. So as Director Lane mentioned, we did make, staff did make a presentation to the Board Executive Committee, a subcommittee of the board last week, and the Board Executive Committee unanimously recommended that the park be named Thurgood Marshall Regional Park, home of the Port Chicago 50. This recommendation is based on staff's consideration of many names following several years of public workshops, surveys, research, conversations with key stakeholders, and significant substantial input from the local community. Thurgood Marshall Regional Park, home of the Port Chicago 50, has emerged as an important name to honor the advocacy of the former Supreme Court Justice Thurgood Marshall and to honor the history of the explosion at the Port Chicago Naval Magazine, as the base was called at the time, but especially to honor the history of the 50 young men, many of them teenagers, only 17 or 18 years old, who in the wake of the explosion stood up to the US government to challenge unjust and unsafe working conditions and paid the cost by being unfairly charged with mutiny. The name has also emerged as a significant symbolic name to the regional Black community today to establish a public space where African American history is told, where Black American heroes are celebrated, and where the Black community is truly welcomed, truly and explicitly welcomed. The name Thurgood Marshall Regional Park invites an exploration of themes of equality, racial justice, and social protest. Thurgood Marshall is a national figure who advocated for the NAACP, but also for the sovereign rights of Native Americans and the rights of workers to safe working conditions. The best park names help to educate us about the stories of the land, all of the stories of the land, who has lived and worked on the land, what are the stories that happened there, and the way that the land endures and connects us all. This name, Thurgood Marshall Regional Park, home of the Port Chicago 50, is already serving the purpose of educating, exploring, and connecting. Going through this process has opened my own eyes to how many of our stories, American stories, local stories, are forgotten. I didn't learn about this story in school. I'm guessing many of you did not either. My children didn't learn about this story in school, even though they grew up only a few miles from the base. And it was only when I listened to the members of the Black community, including colleagues and coworkers here at the Park District, that I really began to feel this story and to understand the impact that the not telling of this story has had and continues to have on everyone in the East Bay community. So I'm grateful to the person who first told me the story of the Port Chicago 50 when I came to the Park District 7 years ago, the Park District's Chief of Planning, Brian Holt. I suspect for that many of the people in this meeting, Brian was your first storyteller too for this story. In close collaboration with Reverend Diana and Friends of Port Chicago, Brian has been learning the story and telling the story for 15 years now. It's an honor to introduce him to tell you the story here once again. Thank you. Go ahead, Brian.
Thank you, Christina, and good evening to all the Park Advisory Committee members, Chair Rickard, and Director Lane. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm Brian Holt, Chief of Planning, Trails, and GIS for the Park District. And I'm going to pop up my presentation here. So we're here tonight at the Park Advisory Committee to consider a name for what has been referred to as the Concord Hills Regional Park. And as Director Lane mentioned, this was a placeholder name that was attached to the park to move away from the Naval Weapons Station, a name. So it's never been formally named. We're not renaming anything. We're adopting a name for this park, for this future park that has been restricted to public access really since the 40s when it was originally established. And this is what the public sees now, restricted area. And we are excited to continue to work towards expanding access to this park for everybody. So as mentioned, and I'm sorry, I failed to update this slide. So staff's requesting that the Park Advisory Committee recommend the name Thurgood Marshall Regional Park under the Port Chicago 50. We did bring this to the executive committee on May 11th, and they did unanimously support the recommendation. We're here tonight, May 24th, at the PAC, and we hope we will receive your recommendation as well and bring this forward to the board of directors on June 1st. Thurgood Marshall Regional Park, as mentioned, Thurgood Marshall represented and advocated for the Port Chicago 50 in their trial following the explosion of at the Port Chicago base. And a lot of that history is laid out in the staff report that I hope you've all had an opportunity to review. You can see many of the sailors in the upper left-hand corner walking out on the piers there. And then in the lower area here, this is a picture of Spencer Sykes Sr. And I had the pleasure of working with Spencer Sykes Jr., his son, for many years as he served on the board of the Friends of Port Chicago. So pleased to be able to share that photo of him. So where we at? We're talking about the future regional park on the former Concord Naval Weapons Station. So this is 2,540 acres located south of Highway 4, really on the eastern portion, east of Mount Diablo Creek, on the area that was a former inland area of the Concord Naval Weapons Station. This is really forms the green belt between the cities of Concord and Pittsburgh. And then you can see the light shaded area to the north of Highway 4. That's the active Army base, Military Ocean Terminal Concord. So that remains an active Army use. And there is an existing Port Chicago Naval Magazine National Memorial, approximately a 5-acre site that's located on the waterfront there, managed by the National Park Service. That National Park site is really powerful, and I encourage everybody to visit it, but it's largely off limits to the public because it is located on an active military facility. And I'll just mention also just to the south of those words where it says Port Chicago Naval Magazine National Memorial, that's where the town site of the former town of Port Chicago was located. So that town site is not located within this park site that we're currently working on, nor was it adjacent to it, and it's located up in that northern area. So I'm going to quickly just go over some of the park features. I'm not sure if everybody is as familiar with it. So again, 2,540 acres of former military property that really provide expansive views of Mount Diablo, the Diablo Valley, the San Francisco and San Joaquin Delta. This is obviously a picture of a wetter season than we're experiencing now, but if you were to go out there now, you'd be graced with very beautiful golden hills and views of Mount Diablo. We have a vast network of former military footprint military facility across the property, including a network of abandoned rail lines and roadways. These will really serve as the base network for a planned network of new trails, rail to trail conversion, 22 miles or so. So real great opportunity for pretty expansive public access. And then we have approximately 70 munition magazines. This is from the inside of one of these magazines. And really a lot of opportunities for creative reuse inside these magazines. Could be interpretive displays of the military history of the property, interpretive displays of the native history of the property, or the more local history of the town of Port Chicago could be occupied within some of these sites. And with 70 of these, we have just a lot of opportunities to look at many different opportunities for reuse and interpretation of the property's history. And these magazines, if you've seen as you drive Highway 4, are really a defining feature of the landscape as the magazines are spread across the property. So there's really no mistaking this site's military history when you're on the property. And then we have a number of buildings, former military buildings, including this building here on the left or on the right, which was a former maintenance building. And this is the site that we have planned for and is included in the land use plan as the site of the future visitor center that would highlight the history of the Port Chicago Naval Magazine National Memorial, and lots of opportunities to include all of the history of the property within this building and within the surrounding area. So, but the focus of this visitor center will be on the history of the Port Chicago explosion. But I think even more important than the explosion is really the history of its aftermath, the bravery of the Port Chicago 50 in standing up to the U.S. military to fight for civil rights. And then the role that their bravery and the representation and advocacy of Thurgood Marshall played in our nation's ongoing struggle for civil rights. This was a direct precedent to the Navy desegregating and ultimately the U.S. military desegregating in 1948. So really a significant event in a history that should be widely known. So I am going to just kind of go over some of the history of the property and history of the process of kind of how we've gotten here to naming a park. So the Port Chicago Naval Magazine was originally established in 1942. Originally, when it was established, it only included the 7,600 acre tidal area, tidal portion. At that time, it was established simply as a transfer depot. There was no on-site storage. There's none of those magazines that I showed. As a result of just being a transfer depot, that really caused a rushed working condition where munitions would come in by train and they would need to be unloaded immediately onto a ship to make way for a new ship, a new train to come in. And since the facility was operated as a segregated facility, this really resulted in unsafe and unjust working conditions that placed African-American sailors in some of the most dangerous jobs, working under rushed conditions. And that ultimately led to the explosion on July 17, 1944, where 320 men died, mostly African-American. And of course, following that explosion where white officers were offered bereavement leave and able to go and do what they needed to take care of themselves, African-American sailors were ordered to clean up the mess in order to go back to work with no new safety protocols or new training or really nothing. So in 1945, to address some of those safety concerns that arose from the lack of on-site storage, the Navy purchased the 5,200 acre inland area. This was a response to the explosion at Port Chicago for the need for additional storage, and many years later was renamed the Concord Naval Weapons Station. So this site operated as the Port Chicago Naval Magazine for many years. The inland area ultimately closed in 1999, was officially closed by the Base Reuse and Alignment Commission in 2005. That's when the tidal area was transferred to the Army, and it continues to operate as Military Ocean Terminal Concord. And the inland portion has been evaluated for reuse. The city of Concord has been working on reuse of their portion of the property. And of course, we've been working on the future park site within our area. So again, the Concord Reuse Project that I just mentioned was initiated by the city of Concord to evaluate the reuse in 2006. A reuse plan was adopted in 2010 that included the 2,540 acre new regional park plus 12,000 new homes and 6 million square feet of commercial within the city's planning area. In 2010, that same year, President Obama established the Port Chicago Naval Magazine National Memorial. That's the official national park site on the waterfront. But in that legislation, Congress specifically authorized the East Bay Regional Park District to work with the National Park Service to jointly operate a visitor center within the regional park site to highlight Port Chicago history. In 2019, the East Bay Regional Park District accepted possession of the future regional park site. And then in 2020, we were able to adopt the land use plan for the property, which guided the future park development. And I'll discuss some of the details of that land use plan. So the naming process, this really started back in 2015. Names were solicited throughout the public land use plan process. We took in suggestions through every public workshop, had a number of individual conversations with people. We took suggestions and had a sort of voting process at various Port Chicago commemoration events. A number of top names were identified, and those were circulated in a survey. and shared by the City of Concord, City of Pittsburgh, Save Mount Diablo, and the Park District. We also included in there just an open-ended section that allowed for additional names and comments to be offered. It was through that sort of open-ended suggestion that there was a lot of interest in the name for to highlight the Native American history of the property, and there was a lot of interest in highlighting the Port Chicago history of the property. These results and the other suggestions were presented to the Park Advisory Committee and the Executive Committee, and there was a lot of support for the Concord Hills name. But the PAC and the Executive Committee directed staff to engage with Native people to start identifying a Native affiliated name for the property. And we did that. We engaged with the tribal leaders throughout the Bay Area. And I want to thank them specifically for their time in engaging in this process. And we developed a couple names and we brought those back to the Executive Committee. And it was at that time that there was really significant public comment that came out stressing that an interest in a name should reflect the Port Chicago history and the African American history. So the Executive Committee directed us to begin to reach out again and identify a name that could honor that history as well. And we also continued to reach out to Native people about the input that we had received to get their input throughout that. And what's emerged is a broad coalition supporting the name Thurgood Marshall Regional Park, home of the Port Chicago. So why does staff support the name Thurgood Marshall Regional Park, home of the Port Chicago 51? And we do want to acknowledge this is a community recommendation. This is coming from the community, from people who are rallying around this park and have expressed strong interest in this park, interest in the history of this park. And really significantly, it celebrates a prominent leader who fought for civil rights for all. One thing that I've certainly grown to appreciate is just a lot of African-American history and African-American figures who are celebrated are often, those who have had to sacrifice or those who had to suffer, where Thurgood Marshall is really an inspirational figure who rose to the top levels of government, fought for civil rights for all, fought for civil rights for Native Americans, for the African American community, and really for everybody. And that's important to celebrate and lift up those who had a very positive impact. And as Christina mentioned, this name provides immediate educational opportunities regarding our nation's past and continued struggle for civil rights. This is a real opportunity to stimulate conversations around African American history, and we've seen just a lot of people learning about this story for the first time, just based on this conversation, and we'll continue to do so through the naming of this park. But the Thurgood Marshall name also provides themes of social justice, protest, and resilience that provides an opportunity for real detailing of the site's broad history. This site had struggled through the Vietnam era, through the Cold War era. We're familiar with protests and Brian Wilson having lost his legs, and of course the Native American history of this property and the Rancho history of this property, and really social justice, protest, and resilience is a theme that is woven throughout this site's history. So the home of the Port Chicago 50, and we had a number of conversations around the tagline, home of the Port Chicago 50. We do think it's really important to recognize the bravery of the Port Chicago 50 to protest an unjust and racist system. I think, we often hear of civil rights leaders like Martin Luther King Jr., Rosa Parks, and others whose contributions have carried through in the history books. But we haven't heard about the Port Chicago 50, and these are men who stood up to a system long before the sort of modern civil rights era, and during a time of Jim Crow and segregation, stood up to the most powerful institution in the world, the U.S. military. And this was an early act of organized civil disobedience, early labor story of organizing to call for safer working conditions. I think it's important, truth and history, to acknowledge that at the time, Black sailors were banned from the town of Port Chicago. They really didn't have a home, and they probably weren't, came from places where, they were suffering from segregation and Jim Crow laws at the time as well. Their protests garnered national attention, and ultimately directly led to the desegregation of the Navy, and led to the desegregation of the full military in 1948. And I've also just learned to understand the significance of the word home to the historically excluded African American community. As a white male, I often find myself at home in just about any space that I enter into. And I recognize that's not the case for everybody. Just the word home has an important meaning to the African American community. I think it's something that we all should understand. And really, this is a place to celebrate African American history. This isn't a place to focus on the explosion, isn't a place to focus on the tragedy, but this is a place to really lift up and to celebrate African American history. So I just want to take a little moment just to discuss, who are the Port Chicago 50? These were all men with names, many of them, teenagers. They had families that they left behind to serve their country, and following their unjust mutiny trial and their conviction, went on to have families and lives after their service. We don't know much about these men. We don't know much about how this event impacted them. Many of them, we've heard stories that they, felt a sense of shame for what had transpired. And certainly it has intergenerational impacts. And so this opportunity gives us an opportunity to understand their stories, to honor the Port Chicago 50, and to really just to recognize them. So I think it's important to say their name and to. So recognizing the PAC and the executive committee's direction, which is an important direction, is that we need to recognize Indigenous history and continue to acknowledge Native people. Staff supports that, and that's very much consistent with our master plan and direction. We, through this process and just through our conversations with Native people, there's a number of ways that we can continue to recognize Indigenous history, either through consideration of cultural easements and joint stewardship opportunities at sacred sites that Park District owns. Certainly, we could work with Native people on formal land acknowledgement process, and I'm recognizing that I should have started this presentation with acknowledging that this is the property we're talking about is Chupcon territory, where the Chupcon people, this is their ancestral homeland. But we can continue to work with them to incorporate more land acknowledgement on our park maps, signage, and interpretive materials. We could work with Native people in development of a cultural resource management plan for the East Contra Costa County Habitat Conservation Plan area. That's a plan that we have to develop. And so there's real opportunities to partner with Native people to really give them an opportunity to do what we heard more specifically, which is more important than naming of a single park, but is to actually give them a connection back to the land. But of course, we can continue to explore future naming opportunities at other currently unnamed parklands, Payton Ranch, Deer Valley, Vasco Hills, Beeland Canyon. These are all parks that similarly don't have an assigned name that we can have similar conversations. So again, I want to acknowledge the tribes that engaged in the naming discussion, who are listed here. And I do want to mention this picture on the right, really fascinating story. This was a healing pole that exists on the Indian Canyon Mutsun Band of Costamoan people on their property. But this was carved from a cedar log that was actually salvaged from the Port Chicago site. It is really exists as a symbol of solidarity and a symbol of healing from the Native community. So looking forward, again, I think all of us are interested in when can this park be open? A lot of good things that are in the plan. We have, this was approved in July 2020, 22.7 miles of new trails, group camping facilities, picnic areas, outdoor classrooms, interpretive reuse of magazines. These are really sites, these outdoor classrooms and magazines that can be used to tell all of the stories of the property. So from the native history, the rancho history, and beyond. And of course, the joint operated National Park Service and East Bay Regional Park District Visitor Center that is really going to focus and highlight the significant Port Chicago. So again, that visitor center was approved and included in the partnership included in the legislation signed by President Obama in 2010. We have a cooperative management agreement signed by the Park District and National Park Service in 2015, and we just renewed that in 2020. This will serve as the primary park destination, highlighting the history of Port Chicago. We hope it will have a facility for community meetings, film showings, and symposiums, really a space for conversation. And will also serve as the boarding areas for reservations so people can actually board the shuttle and go visit the actual Port Chicago National site. So you can see on the left-hand side here a couple of renderings of what that visitor center could look like. So again, our recommendation for the board, for the Park Advisory Committee, we're seeking that you recommend the name Thurgood Marshall Regional Park, home of the Port Chicago 50, to the full board of directors for adoption, which we'll intend to bring back on June 1st. And with that, that concludes my presentation, and I am happy to answer any questions and look forward to hearing from the public who's here today.
Great. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Christina. Are there questions for them? Irene.
Hi, yes, I would like to find out if the Park District has a naming policy.
We do have a naming policy, and I can certainly provide a copy of that to you. But if you have any specific questions about what's in the naming policy, I can answer that as well.
Well, I was just wondering if it wasn't part of our packet. So I wasn't sure if this naming meets the qualifications within the Park District's policy.
Yeah, it does, in the short answer, and I guess we could have been more explicit in that. The naming policy really says that it gives fairly broad latitude to allow parks to be named after significant geographic, natural, and historic features and stories of the property. And then sets out a policy by which that name is decided, which is why we're here tonight.
Okay, the other thing is I generally don't like the idea of naming parks after people, because people do tend to fail us over the years. It's the nature of people as more things come out. But the one thing that I also am curious about is a little bit more about Thurgood Marshall's exact influence in this, because sometimes it's the rank and file who actually created this scenario, but I'm unclear exactly, other than being an advocate for the 50 say.
Yeah, no, I appreciate. Thank you, Commissioner. So we did try to describe that history within the PAC report, and is also listed in the land use plan and the National Park Service interpretive foundation document. I'll give my quick summary here. That I didn't provide as much of that in the presentation, but so at the time of following the explosion and the initiation of the unjust mutiny trial against the Port Chicago 50, the members of the Port Chicago 50 actually wrote to Thurgood Marshall and asked him to come and to observe the trials. So as legal counsel for the NAACP. So he came to the Bay Area, to Treasure Island, which is where the trial was held, and really started to call out the Navy, and had a number of quotes that said, this is not a trial against the Port Chicago 50, this is really a trial of the Navy's racist policies, and started to write a series of articles and really tried to gain national attention on that. Following the convictions, he did appeal the convictions and met with the Secretary of the Navy at the time, and actually put out a pamphlet they began with the words, "Remember Port Chicago." And that pamphlet and that advocacy and that history gained the attention of Eleanor Roosevelt and others who put a lot of pressure on Truman, President Truman, to move forward with, first with the Secretary of the Navy, and then to President Truman to move forward with desegregation of the military. So it was really Thurgood Marshall's advocacy and his writings that kind of kept the history of Port Chicago alive. And it was the Port Chicago 50 actually reaching out to Thurgood Marshall that got his attention on it. And that was sort of history that was not known for many years until in the 80s, when Professor Robert Allen, who's a professor of sociology at UC Berkeley, found that pamphlet that said, "Remember Port Chicago," and sort of prompted him to say, what's Port Chicago? What's the history there? And started to dive into that history, and ultimately, led him to writing the book, which I happen to have right here, The Port Chicago Mutiny, to keep that history alive. So it was really Thurgood Marshall who kind of kept the history alive, appealed the convictions, got the national attention, and really kept the pressure on the military to lead to desegregation. So that's my 5-minute synopsis there.
Great, thank you. Neil, you have a question.
Yeah, I mean, it's not so much a question. I just wanted to express my great enthusiasm for this name and support for it. And thanks to you, Brian, for this really interesting and informative presentation. I think it was, probably almost 2 years ago now that many of us went out to the Concord Naval Weapons Station for the conveyance. And I remember seeing the displays, the photographs, and the historical artifacts about this incident and the aftermath. And that for me was really the first time that I learned the details of the story. And I think, that sort of, there are many injustices in the story, as, clearly described by Brian. Many of them early on, but it's a sort of continued injustice that this story is so unknown. And I think we have an opportunity here by our actions and by naming this park, the Thurgood Marshall Regional Park, home of the Port Chicago 50, of elevating this story, elevating this issue, and sort of righting one of the injustices that has kept this story buried for so long. And I think it's also, a real sort of testimony to the power of this story and this place, that the community has come together in such a strong way to support this name. And I think also, given the times we live in, I think it's more clear now than ever that this is, an important and appropriate action for us to take. And so, I fully support this name, and I hope the rest of you will as well.
Great, thank you. Elisa.
Hi, Brian. I want to second what Neil said. Thank you for all of your work on this. I think you've done a great job of listening to the community and developing ideas based on what you're hearing back. I have a couple questions. I think maybe one question, one comment. Just because I know everybody, they weren't present for the naming exercises that we went through with this park. And the options that we had on the survey, and also in the naming exercises, were there any that recognized the significant history that took place here, the civil rights history, the African-American history, any options that represented that when we first went through this process?
Yeah, I'm gonna answer that by, well, one, just acknowledging that naming processes can be a little bit clunky and messy, and don't always follow sort of real clear through line. So the names that were included in the surveys and that were presented, correct, none of those names were specifically Port Chicago focused. And that was a result of a lot of the input that we got. Now, you know, I was a bit surprised by that, that, you know, there wasn't more early on push for sort of a name that recognized Port Chicago. But I think there was sort of some collective thinking that, you know, there's already a national park site. And this is sort of a, you know, that's the story exists on the national park site, and we don't want this site to take away from it, or it's something separate. And I think there was sort of a thought that, you know, that's the national park story. The park district would do something else. I personally, as staff, I think there's a real opportunity for us to partner and work with National Park Service to expand that story. So yeah, there wasn't specifically a name that was included on there. Like I said, there was sort of an open-ended suggestion, and we did hear a lot of support for Port Chicago names as part of that open-ended suggestion. And if you remember, when we did bring it to the PAC, and I always have tried to include just a short, you know, a summary of the Port Chicago history kind of in there. So yeah, if that answers your question.
It does, thank you. And I don't recall, because Thurgood Marshall's involvement in this process is still relatively new to me. I think it came from the coalition that came together to put the name together. So I don't even recall if we talked about it during that first presentation, whether he was a factor in this case or not. The other thing is you're talking about tribal engagement. A couple weeks ago, we had a Contra Costa Watershed Forum meeting where we actually focused on this topic. And one of the ideas that came from this, I think, is really interesting for agencies, and I'm telling everybody about it. So a memorandum of recognition, just recognizing as an agency that there is a significant history to this land that we are managing. I think it's something that should be explored more. So I'm just putting it out there for you guys to take notes on. And then the other part is this forgotten history that, you know, I grew up in Pittsburgh, and I still, for a very long time, had no idea of the Port Chicago 50 or what really happened there. It's not really forgotten, it's hidden. Like a lot of the stories of marginalized people in the United States, like they just aren't told. And so the naming of this park, I think would go a significant way in at least acknowledging the fact that this history is here among us. But again, thank you for all of your work on this. I know it's been quite the process.
Thank you.
Annie.
Thank you. Thank you, Brian, for that very thoughtful and thorough presentation. I ditto a lot that Alyssa and Neil have shared, so I'll be brief and just say that I remember very, like in my body, I think it was an hour we spent at our last PAC meeting listening to people talk about what this place and the name meant. I mean, there were a few times when I wanted to cry because of what they were sharing, and certainly had goosebumps a few times also. And I get the sense here tonight that you, Brian, and your colleagues didn't just hear what folks said, but really heard what folk, are feeling it. And I just want to reflect back to you that I, for one, really appreciate that reflection that you clearly, to me, had, that you didn't just hear it and kind of put it into a data processing system, but actually really are trying to incorporate what you heard and what you've heard from many other conversations into how the district moves forward. And that's not easy work. And that's, it goes against the grain of a white dominant culture, and it goes against the grain of a lot of agencies. So I just wanted to recognize you for that, and thank you for your thoughtfulness. It should be commended, so thank you. And I, like others have said, really support the recommendation by staff to rename the park, or I'm sorry, not to rename, to adopt this name. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Annie. Igor.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. First thing I want to say is I agree with the previous speakers, and I'm very supportive of this naming decision. Everybody's already mentioned a lot of good reasons why this is so. I think one of the things that strikes me is that this is a national significant site because of if it had just been an explosion and a lot of these people had died and all these kinds of things happened, there would have been a really horrendous local tragedy, but that's what it would have been. But because of the aftermath and all the various things that as they played out, it grew into the kernel of a national story, and one that's certainly worth telling and worth being reminded about. As a sort of a annex to this, I'd like to respond to the letter that we recently received from John Keibel. John has made pretty much a lifetime project of photographing the site. He's published a book about it. He's got lots of great wildlife photographs. And he makes the point that a lot of other history has also taken place here. Of course, the native land to start with, the Spanish times, the ranching times. I have a personal connection with this in that I was in the jury pool for a trial during the Vietnam War of a protester whose leg was amputated by a train when they were demonstrating out there. And, you know, that's also part of the history. So this is a piece of land that has just is dripping with history. And I'm confident after hearing the presentation that the best faith effort is going to be made to capture all of it and not to exclude it just because we're naming it for this one particular aspect of our historical narrative. Thanks.
Thank you. Carlin.
Thank you. That was very well said, Igor. And, you know, I just want to say that I've heard from some folks in Concord who were wondering about this. And, you know, whenever they were learning the history, our own history in our city, it's become a source of pride whenever I speak to constituents about this possibility of this naming opportunity. And you know, I'm originally from Western Pennsylvania. I was sharing this with my parents who were still there yesterday, and they knew nothing about this. And so I'm excited to see the park named in this way because I think, you know, between the visitor center and I think giving a home to in a place where people can come and learn about this history, you know, I really see this as being a way to amplify the history and to finally get it into history books where it belongs. So I guess what I would just say is I want to thank everyone who's been working on this, you know, this process and the public engagement, and particularly those who have come forward and spoke to the PAC last time, and I believe are going to speak to us again. And so I just feel that even if those who might not agree with the name, because they were looking for other naming opportunities, I think once they learn more about the history, I think they'll come to be excited about this as we are. So just wanted to share that perspective. Thank you.
Thanks, Carlin. Michelle?
Great. Thank you, Rick. And I wanted to also just echo what Igor and Carlin said and all the other speakers. I'm in full support, but I also, Brian, really wanted to thank you for your presentation on, you know, the inclusion of how, you know, naming this particular park and while centering that, which I think is extremely important as it hasn't been done, does not exclude the other history. And, you know, that there is just lots of opportunity and, you know, by centering one and amplifying, you know, the Black community through the naming does not exclude the other stories that will be told. And I think that's really important for us to all remember and for us as we go forward. So I you know, am in full support. I think it's fantastic and I'm excited about it. And I, you know, being not really from the community, but then living here and hearing about Port Chicago and knowing and learning about this history, it seems like a no-brainer that this is what needs to be done. And I really look forward to the opportunity to support this. But I did want to thank you, Brian, for your thorough report and really highlighting that, because I think that's important for people to really understand that by amplifying one, we don't forget the others, which we have done currently in our society. So we want to try to not do that. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Michelle. I don't see any other questions or comments from the PAs. Oh, Linda Best.
Yes, thank you, Rick. Actually, the recent commentators have said what I was going to say, that we should not forget the other stories about that have taken place on this land, such as Native Americans. And it may be a bit early, Brian, for you to be able to answer this, but I assume there will be plans in place to make sure that those stories are told. Can you respond a bit to that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So the land use plan that was adopted, kind of goes through and makes an attempt through a planning document to tell and to identify each of that story from the Native history all throughout. So as I mentioned, there's a number of different facilities, classrooms, picnic areas, other. So what the land use plan actually proposed is sort of different interpretive zones throughout the property. So a zone that is focused on war and history, military history, an area focused on indigenous history, an area focused on rancho history. That'll continue to kind of be developed as facilities are developed, but I think that'll be the the process moving forward is sort of continuing to kind of identify the sort of mosaic of stories that we can identify, and also using other naming opportunities, whether it's trail naming or facility names or other things to kind of use those opportunities as well. But of course, we have to, getting the park open to the public is a top priority too. So, it'll be a long-term endeavor as we continue to do that. But I think continuing to, in each of our planning documents, to kind of hammer that home will be part of it.
Right, thank you.
All right, Dev, you have a comment.
Thank you, Jeff. Rick, but I want to say, echo what others have said. Just thank you to Brian for a great presentation. I, for one, hadn't heard anything about the Port Chicago 50 till I saw this, and it wasn't specifically mentioned today, but I went back and sort of read a little bit about the history of it. But this really led to the desegregation of the Navy. That's a pretty big deal that happened as a result of this, what happened here. So these, and what happened to the sailors, and most of them were set free, but I think a couple of them ended up spending much more time in jail. Their decision was not reversed, even though there was a second court-martial. So, I also agree that there's other history which will be acknowledged there, but I think it's appropriate to do this. So I support it. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Andrew.
You're unmuted. First, I want to thank Brian for the presentation. I think it was very well done. As a Navy brat, I grew up in the Bay Area, and we knew about the explosion at Port Chicago, but did not know about the civil rights ramifications. I think this is a really excellent idea, and I've changed my opinion, actually, as a result of this presentation. So, good job.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. I would like to move on to public comments unless there's other people who wish to speak. Madam Secretary, do you have public comments for us?
Yes, we do. Mr. Mims, since he's on screen right now, would you like to do the first public comment, sir?
Not exactly, but I'll go if you call on me first. To the East Bay Regional Park Advisory Committee. My name is William Mims. I'm a member of the East County NACP. I've come before this committee and many others expressing my views about the name of the Concord Hills to be renamed or changed to Thurgood Marshall Regional Park, home of the Port Chicago 50. The name itself resurrects the memory of the town of Port Chicago. It's a Navy base. The tragic explosion that took 322 lives, of which 202 were African-American soldiers. and the tremendous damage that that explosion caused to Port Chicago and its citizens. The events that happened there have been buried in the cesspool of America's racist history. You must not allow it to stay buried. Only by renaming the Concord Hills to Thurgood Marshall Regional Park, home of Port Chicago 50, will this city and the events that happened there be forever placed on top of America's history table. It is a way to reveal a truth that has been hidden for more than 50 years. And it is a way to tell the story about Thurgood Marshall, the NAACP civil rights lawyer who came to defend the 50 soldiers who were put on trial for refusing to go back to work a few weeks after that explosion. And lastly, I want to thank Brian Holt and his staff for the excellent report. And thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Fatima Call.
Hello, I want to just thank can you guys hear me? Okay. I want to thank the Park Committee, Advisory Committee. My name is Fatima Call. I'm a board member with the Citizens for Historical Equity. Our organization supports the East Bay Regional Park District staff recommendation for Concord Hills Regional Park to be named the Thurgood Marshall Regional Park, home of the Port Chicago 50. I think everybody who has spoken just stood up for that, backed us. We appreciate that. Additionally, we would like to thank the Parks District Board Executive Committee for recommending that the name park go before the full board for approval. We appreciate your consideration and thank you for that wonderful presentation.
Thank you, Fatima.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Louis Thrower. Mr. Thrower?
Good afternoon, Chair Rickert and Park Advisory Committee. My name is Louis Thrower, board member with Citizens for Historical Equity. The East Bay Regional Park District's proposed park name, Thurgood Marshall Regional Park, home of the Port Chicago 50, is officially endorsed by the following elected officials. Andy Lee, President, Contra Costa Community College District Governing Board. Antonio Hernandez, Unified School District Trustee, Area 1, City of Antioch. Carl Onduri, Council Member, City of Lafayette. Carol Dutra-Bernacci, Mayor, City of Union City. Dimlis Johnson III, Council Member, City of Richmond. Denisha Marsh, Board Member, Los Medanos Community Health District. Ellie Householder, Antioch Unified School District. Janelle Gary, Mayor, City of Albany. John J. Bowders, Council Member, City of Emeryville. Jovita Mendoza, Council Member, City of Brentwood. Kevin Wilk, Mayor, City of Walnut Creek. Lamar A. Thorpe, Mayor, City of Antioch. Marie Arce, Chair, Antioch Parks and Recreation Commission. Merle Craft, Mayor, City of Pittsburgh. Monica E. Wilson, Mayor Pro Tem Vice Mayor, City of Antioch. Newell Arnrich, Vice Mayor, City of Danville. Pat Young, President, Los Medanos Community Health District. Peggy McQuaid, Council Member, City of Albany. Preston Jordan, Vice Mayor, City of Albany. Rochelle Nason, Council Member, City of Albany. Steve Glazer, Senator, California Senate District 7. Susan Candell, Mayor, City of Lafayette. Susanna Meyer, Council Member, City of Brentwood. Teresa Geringer, Vice Mayor, City of Lafayette. And Valerie Arkin, Council Member, City of Pleasanton. We appreciate your consideration for this Park Advisory Committee, and we thank you for your support. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Victoria Adams. Ms. Adams?
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. Again, my name is Victoria Adams. To the committee members and the staff, I want to say thank you. And I want to thank the executive committee for supporting the renaming of the Concord Hills Regional Park to the Thurgood Marshall Regional Park, home of the Port Chicago 50. I also want to take a minute to say to Ms. Lane, thank you for the additional information that you shared with us today regarding the ranchers and others who were also severely impacted by this tragedy. And we understand that there are so many others who have been devastated by what happened, by this history. And we do understand, and we do have empathy for those who have been impacted. We want you to know that. But with that being said, we also want you all on these various boards and committees to know that you have heard everything that we have been saying. And we want you to know that with the confirmation of your yes vote to this recommendation, it will let us know that you are willing to act in good faith to ensure that this community is a community that you care about and that you embrace the diverse representation that it exhibits, and that you care that it is time that our story is to be told. And that is all we ask. So thank you.
Thank you, Victoria.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Yuli Padmore.
Hi, just getting all set up here. Good afternoon, Chair Rickard and Park Advisory Committee. Thank you for your time today, and thank you for so many of your thoughtful comments. Very touching to see. The town of Port Chicago and those residents who were affected by the Port Chicago disaster deserve to be recognized at the future regional park. The former residents of the town of Port Chicago deserve more than just the compensation they received from the Navy to relocate and the MPS site, highway, and streets that stand in their honor. They deserve to be remembered. And I support the Park District's assurances that their story will not be forgotten. I would like to thank the Park District's Planning Department, obviously, Acquisition, Stewardship, and Development, AGM, Christina Kelchner, Brian Holt, and Devin and Kim and all of their team, and the interpretive staff for their public commitment to honor the many stories of the land, including the stories of the town of Port Chicago and its former residents. Park District staff's thoughtful recommendation to name the future park at the former Concord Naval Weapons Station in honor of Thurgood Marshall and the Port Chicago 50 recognizes those who publicly spoke up for all who were affected by the Port Chicago disaster. The staff's recommended name best encapsulates all the stories and education of this land, including the naval history, Indigenous history and culture, the civil rights protest and advocacy, and the devastation brought about by the Port Chicago disaster that killed 320 people and caused injuries, destroyed property, and eventually led to the paid relocation of the many residents of Port Chicago. I thank the Board Executive Committee for their support of the Park District staff recommendation to name the future park Thurgood Marshall Regional Park, home of the Port Chicago 50. Thank you all so much for your time and all of the effort for this project. Thank you.
Thank you, Yuli.
Thank you. And our last speaker on the subject is Yolanda Burial Knight.
Thank you, Sharon.
Good afternoon, Chair Rickard and the Parks Advisory Committee. My name is Yolanda Burial Knight, and I'm an employee of the Park District for the past 29 years. And I am also co-founder and member of the Black Employee Collective of East Bay Regional Park District. I am here before you today to express my gratitude for my coworkers, Brian Holt, Devin Reef, and Christina Kelchner, for not only listening to the many African-American stakeholders and voters who formed a strong coalition of folks who have never met personally into a strong coalition of like-minded communities advocating to name this park, Thurgood Marshall Regional Park, home of the Port Chicago 50. Not only did you listen, Brian, but you each crafted a staff report that speaks to the engagement of the African-American community and many local and state electeds. Citizens for Historical Equity, whose white paper was historically accurate and whose petition created a buzz in our communities, made each of us sit up and realize that this park is the only park where this history can be told. And this district, known for being the best in the nation, is the only district that can tell this story. Our interpretive staff can and will expand its interpretation of this history to include all of the details that so many have never known. Thurgood Marshall was the one who did the advocacy work that is done in the halls, or as DGM Alvarez says, at discussions around the water cooler. This is where the real stuff happens. When mission and passion merge, new directional action happens. This park will be the first park named after a Black person in Contra Costa County. That's amazing. It will not only acknowledge Thurgood Marshall, it will also honor the sailors, all young boys and men who died doing their jobs in 1944 for the US Navy. This nonviolent inaction revealed the need for desegregation of the Navy, and Thurgood Marshall was just the Black man to advocate for this new direction. History is not just for one group. History is history, the good, the bad, and the ugly. When we downplay one to support another, we do as so many have done in our history, put one minority against another. Those days are over. If we don't all rise, we will not all rise. If this history makes you uncomfortable, then understand that our entire lives as people of color is uncomfortable. Black, Native American, Asian, Pacific Islander, Mexicans, it's uncomfortable. What some feel now is what we feel every single moment, and what we have to learn from the moment we learn how to walk as we study history that has not included any people of color in any other way than enslaved, savage, impoverished, and uncivilized. And realize this history we were all taught made us uncomfortable because we knew it wasn't true. The indigenous population deserves to be honored, and in some cases the district has done so. However, it can always do more, and we as employees of the Black Employee Collective will continue to advocate for all peoples, including our own, whose history must be told in our park district. This first step is history in the making. It will reverberate across the nation. And I have no doubt that the children of color will gravitate to this history and to this park. And I, for one, am looking forward to being a volunteer and going into a park where my sons and their friends and families of color will be welcomed. Thank you, Chair Rickard and Parks Advisory Committee, for the time.
Rick, you're on mute.
Thank you for your comment, Yolanda. That's it for comments on regarding the Concord Hills naming.
Can you hear me now? Because it says I'm unmuted, but
Yeah,
okay.
you are now unmuted.
Okay. All right, then this is a recommendation item. And so I would entertain a motion to forward to the full board our approval of the name Thurgood Marshall Regional Park, home of the Port Chicago 50.
I would make the motion that we recommend the board name name the park Thurgood Marshall Regional Park, home of the Port Chicago 50.
I'll second that motion.
Second.
Who was the second?
It's a race.
I heard several seconds, but pick a name, Sharon, and put it on there.
Don't put me on the spot.
Is there any further discussion of the motion? If not, then Madam Secretary, would you call the roll?
May I ask who was the second?
It was Andrew. At least I heard Andrew, then Marie.
Yeah, I think I got in first.
Okay, thank you. Member Obringer,
Yes.
Member Arce,
Yes.
Member Best,
Yes.
Member Burke,
Enthusiastically, yes.
Member Carey,
Aye, aye, aye.
Member Chang,
Yes. Yes.
Member Claxton,
Yay.
Member Corkin,
Yes.
Member DeChambeau, Member DeChambeau. She's bounced in and out of this meeting. I think her connection's not very good. I can come back to her. Member Dieter,
Yes.
Member Ho,
Yes.
Member Lacey,
Yes.
Member Mahadevan,
Yes.
Member Nason,
Yes.
Member Robinson,
Yes.
Member San Juan,
Yes.
Member Skardoff,
Yes.
Member Satsui, sorry,
Yes.
Member Williams,
Absolutely.
Chair Rickard,
Yes.
and Member DeChambeau. Are you back in the meeting? I don't see her here, so that's all the votes.
All right. And that is done. Thank you all. We're going to, given that this very important item ran very long, we're going to have Carol Johnson come back another time with the public affairs work plan and go on at this point to hear about capital projects from Lisa Gourjian. I think.
Yes, good afternoon. Thank you, Chair Rickard. Should I begin?
Yes, please.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Good afternoon. Good evening almost. My name is Lisa Gourjian. I'm the Chief of Design and Construction at the district. And this is my third year presenting to the Park Advisory Committee. And so as in years past, I'm going to just kind of take the time to look backward on what we've done this past year since we last saw you, and then looking ahead where we're headed. And I'll just move ahead with the presentation, but certainly if you have any questions, feel free to interrupt or you can wait till the end. So it's, I think, just more for informational. Okay, I'm going to start sharing my screen and get started. Let's see. How does that look?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, wonderful. So this is a photo at the El Valle, the water treatment system. I just thought I'd start with this to talk a little bit about the projects that we are doing in the design and construction, and also to just as a reminder that while I'm fortunate to be in front of you this evening. Really, I'm representing the Design and Construction Department, 30 staff in our department, and we're part of the Division of Acquisition, Stewardship, and Development. So we work very closely with Brian and Christina and our Stewardship Department, Acquisition Department, and also across the district. So we work closely with Eric in Government Affairs, and also Public Affairs and Operations and Grants. So anyway, just please know that as we're talking about these projects, really they're wide projects that really take a village to move them along. And I guess I'm just pausing and reflecting on the previous board action and just how proud I am to be able to be at the district and to just to be part of this tonight's vote. So I feel very fortuitous that happened. So thank you. Anyway, so with that, I'm gonna move along with these projects. As I mentioned, Del Val, here it is. I'll talk about it a little bit later, but it's just a great example of these projects that are sometimes once in a lifetime projects. And they, the work that we do is often kind of like a square peg in a round hole. They take a lot of effort. They are projects that get done sometimes. Like, I don't know that I'll ever get to work on another project to rebuild and renovate a water distribution system. We're not typically like a public works department that does, we do roads and bridges every year. It's like every year we have all new projects. And so you'll see that reflected tonight. So this is a summary. Oh, and so what you're seeing here, this is a summary of the work that we've been doing. And I did want to mention, as in years past, this is really a companion to a presentation that was the board workshop for the capital projects and stewardship projects. We happened to give that presentation last Friday, and I can send it to Rick. I can send it to you or Sharon. I think it hadn't been posted, the agenda with the link to that board packet when I did the report that was included for tonight's agenda item. And so it gives a more detailed list of all of the projects that we're working on. And it also references those projects as they're identified in the 2020 project budget book that was also has been adopted by the board of directors. So this is really meant to be a high-level summary of that more detailed information. So right now we're working on, we have about 66 active projects, and I like to talk about them. I think it's helpful to talk about them in terms of what kinds of projects they are. So as you can see, about half of them are projects that are major capital repair and maintenance projects, like that Del Valle water treatment system project. We also spend time on projects that are restoration focused. So they're really advancing the stewardship component mission of the district. And then we also work on projects that are expand district assets and also expansion in terms of public access. So new opportunities for the public to connect with nature and the lands of the East Bay Regional Park District, of the community of our wonderful East Bay. The percentages are the number of projects. They really don't represent the percentages of budget. That's I'll talk about that a little bit later, but that's really just a numerical of the number of projects and the kind that we work on. Last year we completed 12 projects. for a total amount of about a little over 16 million. And for 2021, we anticipate, we're in construction on some, and we anticipate having 17 projects under construction for the remainder of the year. And then on the right is kind of a map that shows where the projects are. And this is really maybe would be the opportunity if you're more inclined to go look at the link to the board packet, which then lists it. It actually lists out all these projects and where they are, but it was just too tiny to put on the presentation tonight. So you'll see in throughout the map, there's dark blue. Those are the projects we've completed and where they're located. We've also identified projects that are in construction, projects that are in the design and permit phase, and then projects that are in pre-design. So I just wanted to give an example of the projects that we're doing that are what we would consider maintenance. They're, the photo here is at Contra Loma, where we're replacing 2 of the fishing docks. They're older wood docks, and we're replacing those with aluminum docks. We're also going to be replacing some of the chemical toilets with new vault toilets. So that's a project that's just underway now. We're also continuing work at Hayward Shoreline to reinforce the pier, the piles. These are bridge piles for the pedestrian bridge at Cogswell Marsh Bridge. We have been doing that over the last couple years. The work can only be done during low tides. And so we're only able to do a little bit each of the work windows that we're allowed to work because of environmental constraints. And then more of a larger capital project is renovating the pool and facility at Roberts Recreation Area. And so I'll show you some photos or a rendering of that later. This is another example of these projects that we work on, kind of the categorization of restoration. So this is a picture at Coyote Hills. This is on the part of Coyote Hills that was acquired. It was a former, it was a donation. I think my understanding is probably a very large donation in value that the district received. It was the former Patterson Ranch property, and it has portions of it will be used for agriculture, but then also a large part of that area will be restored and with native habitat, and then also a new public access area with some trails. So as I mentioned, while these are a small percentage of the projects we do, these projects often can be some of the longest in duration. They can take the most staff time. They're the most complex in terms of regulatory permits. And they often are very attractive for outside funding. So they often are able to, where the district is really able to leverage district either general fund or WW bond funding for outside funding. So while they tend to be very expensive and take a long time, they also are there's a lot of interest in these, in providing monetary support for these projects. And then some other examples are the Sibley McCosker Creek restoration. That's a 2-year project that's in its 2nd year now, and doing some expansion of the sedimentation basins at Lake Temescal. All right, this is a video about that I'm gonna show you from the Martin Luther King shoreline, a section of the Bay Trail along Doolittle Drive that connects the southern portion of the park to the northwestern portion of the park where the Shoreline Center is. And we showed some graphics of this last year, but this is a really nice video that, again, shows a project where it's providing public access where it really didn't exist before. So I'm going to start this video, and I'm hoping that it will work. I'm going to look, Rick, I can see you. So if there's an issue, let me kind of wave. Can you see that?
Yes, we can.
Oh, wonderful. So this is heading north along Doolittle Drive. The airport is right behind us, and we're heading towards the Shoreline Center. That dock is actually not part of the project. It's owned by the port. This new pathway will be we're working with Caltrans. It's on Caltrans right of way. So it's hugging San Leandro Bay and continuing north. Again, this is another dock that's not part of the project. It's owned by the port. So this is coming along, and now we're entering into the park. And so here is what the trail will look like as it's rebuilt. So there's an existing trail that goes along the shore, goes along the bay, and but it's in disrepair. And so as part of this project, it will be rebuilt. And then finally, as we come to the boat launch here, the boat launch will be rebuilt. That's part of the district assets. And as you can see, the trail connection will now cross across that boat launch to avoid conflicts with, right now, the way it works is the trail actually hits right in the middle of the boat launch. And so we're moving the boat launch entrance into the San Leandro Bay a little bit to the east there. So there's more of a seamless at-grade crossing. And so some other examples are the Dumbarton Quarry, new campground by the bay at Coyote Hills that is moving along, and also at Pleasanton Ridge, a new staging area at the Tyler Ranch staging area. Wait, this happened last time. Okay. So I'm just going to move into going over some of the projects that were completed this past year. Just take a moment again just to acknowledge the department and the district in general for really not missing a beat when shelter in place affected us all back in last March. And so while some projects were delayed, for the most part, many of them took a quick pause and then started right back up. And so this is one of them. This is in Alameda at Encinal Beach. This project was to do dune restoration and shoreline restoration, as well as providing some better public access to the beach. This project happened about a year after the city of Alameda renovated the section of the park that's just to the south, where they rebuilt their boat launch and restroom. So now that these two parts of the park, this is the Encinal Beach portion is owned by Alameda, but maintained and managed by the district. There's really a wonderful synergy of these two projects happening, one right after the other. And just in terms of the more welcoming, better, just sort of, I think, user experience, visitor experience that now for this whole area, it's really lifted it up. This is at Contra Loma. This is a project where the surfacing had been deteriorating, and so we were able to take advantage of the swim season being closed and resurfacing it. And the improvements were done also advance, moving us closer to be able to address the situation with the sand. There's sand that's very hard on the surfacing. And so by the way that we were able to resurface it buys us some more time, a longer lifespan than what was there previously. I think this was already mentioned at the Visitor Center at Del Val. So we were fortunate to participate in this project, and the design and the construction department worked on the building renovation before our wonderful and creative design group came in with their new exhibits and had those installed. So this was really renovating the building to remove the portion of it that had previously been a concessionaire, redoing the entrance around it, and then again, making it ready for the new technology and the exhibits coming in. And so hopefully y'all can go next, or I guess on Wednesday, for the ribbon cutting. Here are just some more photos of the water treatment. So the Visitor Center and the water treatment both received significant funding from the state as an appropriation for this project. So the water treatment, what you're seeing here is the water treatment being under construction. It's has just we would say it's in closeout. It's we're commissioning the new system to make sure it's running correctly. It's a very complicated system. It's built specifically for the needs at Del Val. So this is no other water treatment system has the exact same function that this one does. And we're very happy to be able to, I use the term make water, but really treat water for the camping that's just the season's opening up this weekend. And also as part of this, that's harder to see is a replacement of several portions of the distribution lines that were replaced as well as part of this project. These are some of the bridges that were replaced at Garin Dry Creek. So there were 5 bridges, 4 of them got replaced, and 1 was replaced by a ford crossing, so large boulders. I was going to mention with this project and Del Val, one of the challenges we faced this past year was not only COVID, but fires. There was a significant number of days, especially at Del Val, where work was stopped because of the proximity of the fire or because of red flag days where all construction projects actually were stopped. Most of the time, a couple of exceptions along the water, but we worked closely with our fire chief and public safety to really make sure that our construction projects did not cause any fires. So that was, I think, it ended up taking all these projects a little bit longer than anticipated. This is a project at Sibley Huckleberry where a culvert was replaced because to assist with fish passage, but also the culvert was failing and was overtopping the trail, causing the trail to erode. So this was a really great project in that it provides a better trail user experience by putting in this new arch culvert, but it also provided improvements to fish passage and habitat. And this restoration project served as our mitigation for the district's routine maintenance projects that we do. Those projects all have impacts to habitat, and so we have to mitigate. And so this project was a project that we wanted to do and sort of did double duty as it provided mitigation for these other routine maintenance projects done across the district. Here's a couple projects that were finished at Hayward Shoreline. So on the left, ongoing levee repairs, and where we were stabilizing the shoreline, stabilizing on the shore side with the levee. And then on the right, this is Cogswell Marsh pedestrian bridge. I had mentioned earlier, this is the second year that we've done the pile repairs. And so this is them down in the shore working. This year we'll continue to be working on these, and but I think we have at least 2 more years after that. There's just a very short work window that we can work when the tides are low. So the season that we are able to do this work in is from August 1st through the end of January, which sounds like a lot, but then we can only do that during low tides. So it's just one of those things that takes a little bit longer. And we also finished up the work at Lake Anza to install an oxygenation system. And then also this was the second year that we were dredging the little sedimentation pond just below the little farm. Okay, so that we wrapped up our projects. This is just one of the slides that we use to kind of describe the upcoming projects and when we have board interface and where projects originate. So the projects that you just saw and the projects I'll show next really come from kind of 3 places: board priorities that are identified, also voter approved projects. So these are projects that are identified in WW and AA and CC. And then also I've said here from the executive team, really what this means is they're coming from a staff level. So a lot of our maintenance projects that have been identified where work needs to be done, their health, safety, welfare, they get brought to the executive team, who then brings them through a budget process to the board. And then of course the board approves them to advance. And we come at various phases during preliminary design. That's usually a concept plan. So we know something can be built, but the plans that we have, you can't build from them. And then we advance them into what we call the design and permit phase. So that's where the final product at the deliverable there is as a construction set that you can build from. And then we'll come to the board to award a construction contract. And then the board dedication, like on Wednesday for Del Val. So these are some projects that are upcoming. So we will be coming to the board actually in June 1st to move money. So we have some projects that are too big for our maintenance and skilled trades staff to do. And so we'll be using our job order contracting procurement method. So the board has authorized a 4th round of, these are competitively bid contractors to do repair and replacement work. So it's they're kind of like an on-call contractor. And so they're under contract, but we need to move the funds from our major infrastructure repair and replacement fund into the projects. And so those projects will be to make some repairs to the West Shore Trail at Lake Chabot, continue the pile work at Cogswell Marsh, which you just saw, and then also at Point Isabel, the Hoffman Channel Bridge. We've worked on that a couple years ago, and we're continuing that work, and then doing some repair rock wall work at Dry Creek. We'll also be coming to the Board of Directors to authorize a construction contract for the service yard at Dunbarton Quarry. And we will be coming with a construction to award a construction contract for the new staging area at the Tyler Ranch staging area at Pleasanton Ridge. We're also coming with to award a professional services contract. This is for engineering services for the sewer replacement. These are utility infrastructure improvements at Anthony Chabot. Exciting, very exciting. Here's some photos. This is what we showed last year. This is why I wanted to supplement it with a video at MLK Shoreline for the Doolittle Trail section of the San Francisco Bay Trail. We are also anticipate coming with awarding a construction contract for the replacement. Basically, it's a renovation, but it's basically a whole replacement of an expansion of Roberts Pool, and then also of the park office and facility changing rooms, and also for the mechanical and storage room, which is not in this picture, but also important. So this is a rendering of what that will look like. Director Lane is here. She has given us explicit direction to make it beautiful. So we are very excited about this design, which will be both beautiful and, I think, functional. We'll also be coming to the board to give them updates on the building across the street, Peralta Oaks North. We've been wrapped up the program for that, and so we'll now be working on different concepts, designs. So now we get to start looking at what the design, what actually spatially, what the layouts will be. And then also an update on Jewel Lake feasibility study. And finally, I just wanted to go over some of the projects that are in construction now. So we are working on, oh no, sorry, these are anticipated, sorry, I got so excited. These are projects where we're also giving updates. So like the Jewel Lake and Peralta Oaks North, also Hayward Shoreline is a project that we're working on that we'll give a committee update to. So now we're at construction. So this is our schedule. We have amazing staff in design and construction who are always helping me and the district talk a little bit more transparently about what we're doing. And so this is, I think, a really nice graphic to show projects that are in construction this year. So as you can see, we've got about 6 projects that are currently in construction, and we anticipate the remainder coming forward the rest of the year to be able to start construction. So I'm going to show a couple pictures now of the projects that are in construction. So this is a really pretty spectacular photo from a drone that was done by the Dunbarton Quarry Associates. They are building this park at the Dunbarton Quarry Campground, Coyote Hills, for the district. The district is contributing funds as well. To this. So it's going to be open later this summer. Well, it'll be done later this summer, and then I think Park Ops is going to drive it around the block a couple times, make sure it's ready to operate and open. And I think later this summer it will be open. We're still wrapping up construction at Brickyard Cove along the McLaughlin East Shore. So this will be a new day use area with picnicking, restroom, trail, and bay-friendly plantings. This is one of the photos, or a couple photos of the end of the first year of the work at Sibley McCosker of the major creek restoration. So this is about a half mile of creek that was buried in a culvert. And so they're excavating out all this soil, locating it on site for another area as part of our land use plan. And as you can see, some of the creek stabilization as they're daylighting it and planting. At Oyster Bay, we are bringing in soil to build up the future bike skills course, and also earthen bowl for gatherings. Also to the right is the disc golf area that has been, has had a lot of planting done. The tees are gonna go in this summer. We are working with volunteer group disc golf volunteer group. They were unable to work during COVID, and so they are very excited. We're excited that they're resuming in June. And last couple ones are at Tilden, Lake Anza. We're replacing the dam spillway. So that's part of our dam safety work that we're doing. And then at Coyote Hills, I had mentioned that portion of that property was for agricultural use. And so we are replacing a well there that will support the future agriculture. And this is a summary of the projects that we're working on that just talk about, when I say expansion, of where we're really expanding opportunities for the public to access district lands. So kind of roughly in 2-year increments, these are the new access areas or facilities that are coming online. And that we're really excited about. So these are projects that are identified either in construction now or in the design and permit phase or in pre-design. And then we just wanted to say thank you. This is some of our folks, there's about 30 of us generally, but this is a portion of us when we went and toured the Dunbarton Quarry Campground that's under construction with the staff who have been working on that for many, many years. So, and actually before, Rick, before I turn it back over to you, is it okay if I turn it over to Christina Kelchner, our AGM?
Sure.
Okay, I'm gonna stop sharing.
Thank you, Lisa. I just wanted to add a couple of comments. Obviously, this is a lot of work and a lot of projects that Lisa just presented to the group. And I just wanted to comment first on how lucky the district is to have Lisa heading up our design and construction department. I don't know if Lisa is very well known to many of you, but she's been with the district just 3 years this month. Feels like a lot longer. It's hard to imagine when we didn't have her. And she came to the district with over 20 years of experience in managing land acquisition and development and construction in park agencies at all levels, city, county, and state. And so we're really lucky to have her. And the thing I appreciate most about Lisa is that she really puts her people first and puts the district's people first. And so she's a very talented manager and a talented leader. And she's built a lot of cohesion and morale on the team. And that's good because it's just 30 people, as she mentioned, that manages all of these projects. And the district continues to build more complex projects, larger projects, and just more projects. The volume continues to go up. And as Lisa mentioned, part of the challenges of the work is that many of the district's projects are one of a kind. And so unlike a transportation agency that will build roads over and over, the district builds a water treatment system every 30 years. And then we'll build a bridge, that's over a railroad track every 20 years. And so these are one-of-a-kind projects that really take a lot of effort and strategy and that's always been the case at the district, but now we're adding emerging challenges, which is increased popularity of our parks, which is wonderful, but it does increase the demand to provide more public access, and then our increased awareness of the importance of the equity and the inclusion of that access to be sure that we're serving all of the communities. And aging infrastructure continues to be a challenge, and over half of the work that Lisa's group does is just maintaining what we have in our older parks. And then of course, climate impacts, the impacts of drought and wildfire and sea level rise, that resiliency to those impacts needs to now always be part of what we're designing for. So looking back over the district's history, the Park District has been really wildly successful in leveraging funding, getting grants, leveraging funding to provide public access and expand our parks. And we have enough looking forward, enough projects in the queue already to keep us busy for 2 or 3 years at least. But looking ahead, the district is really going to be focused on how do we prioritize the work and the projects given those emerging challenges of sea level rise, equity, inclusion, and just the increased demand. So I just wanted to kind of share that commentary and appreciation for Lisa and the important role, of course, that the PAC plays and all of you play and will continue to play as we look ahead to some of those financing and prioritization discussions.
Thank you, Christina. I see some questions. I see Irene, I see your question, but I see Beverly has a question. Let me go to her first, and then I'll come to Irene.
Thank you. I don't really have a question. I just want to thank Lisa and Christina for their work. You know, the board had a presentation on capital projects last week, and I can vouch for the fact that we end up having some really unique projects. If any of you have gone through the Iron Horse Trail in San Ramon at the southern end, you'll see that they, and I remember asking staff about this, they had a trail that went essentially next to the golf course with some of it on 2 sides, and they ended up putting a protection over the trail so that they wouldn't get hit by golf balls. And I remember saying to Mike Anderson, so how often have we done something like this? And he said, Beverly, we've never done anything like this. And I don't think we've ever done anything like that again. And so, you know, what we need of staff is staff that is knowledgeable and creative in enabling us to have projects that meet what we want to offer to the public and that are sustained over many, many years. For myself and for some others on the board, we have just really been pleased at what has been accomplished in this last, you know, in 2020, when things were so difficult with lots of postponements for a variety of reasons, including fire. And I think we are very much looking forward to having the Dumbarton campgrounds by the bay opening later in the summer, and also the East Shore Brickyard project opening later on this year. People have been watching both of these not only being planned but constructed, and those will be major additions to our parks. So I hope PAC members take advantage of coming and seeing both of these pretty extraordinary projects. So thank you, Rick.
Thanks, Beverly. Irene.
Yes, thank you for the comprehensive presentation. I'm really interested in the Doolittle project, and maybe the next time it comes back to the PAC, I would like to see the imagery of what it looks like from Martin Luther King Park to Alameda, how that would look to attach to the Harbor Bay Bridge. I'm curious about that. I think that's part of the project, correct?
Yeah, this is Lisa again. That is part of the overall San Francisco Bay Trail system plan. So you're right, it is identified, but the segment that we're working on right now just ends at the Shoreline Center. So that phase, another phase.
So the Park District is not part of it's Alameda is kind of excluded then from all of this.
Well, I wouldn't say excluded. I would just say the section that we're working on right now is just from Swan Way to the Shoreline Center. So like many parts of the Bay Trail, we're just chipping away at it in pieces. So the portion that we're working on right now is just the segment. It's about a half-mile segment from, just this one segment. And so, but ideally, we would then be able to eventually work on this next segment.
Is this like phased, or is this another project, or is it part of the project? That's my question.
It is not part of the project that I showed you today. It would be a phase 2.
So it's all one project. What you showed us today is phase 1, and phase 2 hasn't been planned yet. Correct?
Well, I think what I'm saying, maybe I'm not being as clear. So I thank you, Irene. I apologize. I appreciate your patience. I guess what I'm saying is that because I'm newer here, my understanding is that there was some planning that was done. So like the initial planning for that whole segment that would get you to Alameda. And so that was looked at comprehensively from a planning perspective to identify where, like a pre-design. So kind of when I was saying our pre-design is to show like, can it be built? We know where it can be built, but we don't have the construction drawings to build it. It hasn't been in design, in construction, and we don't have funding for that section right now.
But it will be under the Park District's umbrella?
Irene, I'm not sure that we know the answer to that question right
okay.
now. I'm happy to have somebody get back to you on that.
Okay,
Yeah.
so what's being worked on is coming from the Oakland Airport, but actually to get to the neighbor of Alameda is not being considered right now. Okay.
Correct. That would be a future project. That's right.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for Lisa? Oh, Roland.
Hi, Lisa. Thank you for that presentation. I was particularly tickled by your enthusiasm for the sewer line replacement at Lake Chabot, being a sewer guy myself. One of the things I was curious about was you had showed some photographs of bridges that were being put in. Looked like they were, all in one piece, and they had steps up to the bridge over and then steps down the other side. And there were several of those. How does that work with ADA accessibility? Yeah.
Yeah, I think those bridges were replaced, I think, in kind for what was there previously. So the trails that they're on are not necessarily accessible trails. So they're in the they're further back along in the park. So I think, my understanding is with those with accessibility, we do have trails that are accessible, and then they connect to bridges that are accessible, but these particular bridges are not in accessible parts of the park. So that's why there are stairs there. That being said, though, there probably is some, these were, and I would just say, I'm with those projects, they, as I said, sometimes our projects take a really long time. And so those projects
I'm almost certain
designed, what?
Go ahead, Lisa.
Those were projects that were designed and actually contracted out even before I got here. They just happened to finish up this past year. So I'm not as familiar with some of the, I know where they are, and I know that's part of the reason why there's stairs, because like you, I was like, why are there stairs? But, you know, I think we always want to work to have barrier-free facilities. And so I think that's something definitely we would want to continue to revisit.
Okay, thank you. Adela, you have a question.
Actually, it's not a question. I was just going to add a little bit. I'm going to guess that they needed the height of that bridge for flood capacity in that creek. So that's why they had to have steps to go up there.
Yeah, and I understand that, but you can always build a ramp up to the height to go over when that is the case.
If you have enough space for the slope that you have to require.
Call Public Works. Carlin, you have a comment or a question?
Yes, I do. So first of all, it never ceases to amaze me, you know, how much is going on within the park district, how many moving parts, how many assets and resources. So, you know, first of all, kudos to all the staff that are making this happen. But whenever I saw, you know, I heard deferred maintenance and it just got me to thinking about, you know, the challenges every agency faces. And so in terms of raising funds. And so I'm just wondering, is there, like, what's the long-term plan? Because as you're adding new facilities, you have the older facilities that need to be maintained. So is there another bond measure that's in the works, or what's happening to be able to keep up with the ever-growing land acquisition and park development?
I'm going to actually defer to Christina.
Thank you, Lisa. And I'm thinking I might defer to Beverly Lane on this, but certainly it is part of the ongoing fiscal planning for sure. And the district has a healthy maintenance fund that we always are putting money into as an ongoing process, our 553 major maintenance fund. And so, you know, we are, I think no decisions yet, but the district is always looking ahead to figure out how we provide long-term sustainable funding. So I wouldn't be surprised if at some point in the future there is another measure coming forward, but I don't think any decisions have been made at this point. Beverly?
Yeah, and I appreciate that question. So we as we look at the budget and we look at these projects, it's clear we don't have enough funds to complete all of them. And so we are constantly talking about, you know, at what point might we go out for another bond issue? Might we do something in Contra Costa County similar to the FF, which was passed in Alameda? But one of the things that happened a couple of years ago was Proposition 68 was passed by the voters. And what we are seeing now is the fruits of that work on Proposition 68, because you will look at funds that are, you know, we have a list of funds to help pay for different projects. And there are different categories in Prop 68, which the Park District worked on really hard to make sure we're included. And now we are able to tap into those, often via grants, sometimes, well, there's other formulas. And so I have been struck this year when you look at the list of income or resources for different projects, how many of them are some element of Prop 68. And you might take a look at that when you see board materials, because I'm always interested in where the different funds come from. And these Prop 68 amounts are substantial, and they come from different parts of Prop 68. So it is very interesting. And then the other thing I'd like to mention is that in looking at capital projects, I think you all either have access to the budget, or you can, of course, see it online. And the volume 2 of the budget has more specifics on each of the projects. And that's, when we had our capital projects workshop, they would reference pages in volume 2, which allowed us to have a better perspective on it. So just look for Prop 68. It's a pretty exciting source right now.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Beverly. Yeah, Lisa, if you will send that workshop document to Sharon, she can distribute it to the members of the committee. That would be great. Other questions? If not, we'll move on. So we've run long, but it was a valuable meeting, so I'm glad that we've accomplished what we have. That was an information only item, and so we don't need to take a vote on that. We do have one remaining public comment that we skipped over earlier from Bruce Olson. Sharon, if you're available, you can read that to us.
I am, thank you. Good evening, Chair Rickard, committee members, staff, and fellow park users. I am Bruce Olson, a bicycle activist volunteering in eastern and some areas of central Contra Costa County. I'd like to share a bit of good news with you. The Capital Improvements Projects engineer for the City of Concord recently sent me an email regarding the new self-storage facility that is planned to be built on the corner of Solano Way and Marsh Drive in Concord. This project will extend along Marsh Drive to the Walnut Creek flood channel. You will recall that the Contra Costa County is reconstructing the Marsh Drive bridge over the Walnut Creek flood channel. As part of that project, the Iron Horse Trail is receiving a protected crossing of the flood channel. From this bridge, the trail will follow the flood channel heading north toward Waterbird Regional Preserve and then to the bike path over the Benicia Martinez Bridge. In his email, the engineer indicated that he had been able to convince the developer to widen Marsh Drive in front of his project sufficiently to include a bicycle lane between Solano Way and the bridge. This is great news. Both the bridge and the street were built in 1938 and are currently quite narrow. Alas, the Concord Bicycle Plan does not call for bike lanes along this segment of roadway. So we were initially not going to get a bike lane along the edge of this development. After begging and cajoling to no avail, I threatened to sue. Fortunately, the engineer and/or the developer saw the light. Now we will have one additional piece of infrastructure that will make it easier and safer to access a very important East Bay Regional Park District regional trail. Please join me in celebrating. We love the Iron Horse Trail. Mr. Olson, thank you.
Thank you, Bruce. Good news. Does anyone wish to make a comment, members of the committee, at this point? I don't see a lot of enthusiasm for that at this late hour. The only comment I'll make is that Marie and Elisa and I all attended the ribbon cutting of the coal mine exhibit. That was very nice to see people in person. And so glad we can do that. And hopefully we will see more of those in the future. I also a question came up recently about board committee reports. It's always good. I like to encourage PAC members to attend board committee meetings because you can get good information on that. If you're interested in a particular committee, you can ask Sharon to have you put on the distribution list for the agenda or the packet for those committee meetings. And now that we are doing this remotely, The recordings are available after the fact if you go to the website. So a good way, if you're interested in a particular topic, to stay up to date on what's going on with those committees. So with that, I'd ask if there's any old business or new business. If not, then this meeting of May 24th, 2021 is adjourned at 6:42 p.m. The next meeting is scheduled for June 28th, 2021. Roland, did you have a? No, oh, you're just waving goodbye. Okay. Thank you all. It's been long, but very productive.
Thank you.
We'll see you all soon.